EV10. EV10 is really a magical speaker. I first started using EV10 somewhere in the 70s when I was modifying Vibroluxes for people like Lee Ritenour and Mitch Holder, and getting a lot of inquiries of how they can change the sound of their Vibrolux, make it louder, make it more reliable, putting them in Tremoluxes. And also the predecessor to the Super Champ was my own modified Champs, where I'd insert a push-pull output stage, a Princeton output transformer, some extra gain stages on a Champ or VibraChamp chassis. And the problem is finding a really good sounding 10. So the solution to the good sounding 10 wound up being the EV10. Now when I went to Fender and I started designing the Super Champ and brought them the whole Super Champ concept, I thought to myself, regardless of the 10s that we're able to get, ceramic magnet 10s, we need something that really projects a lot more volume, is reliable for multi-year long tours that won't blow out so easy. And so the EV10 was a candidate, and we put the EV10 as an option on the Super Champ. In fact, the Super Champ Woodies, the Super Pro Super Champs, the limited run that we did, were all equipped with EVs as standard, and it was a big change. Now, I mean, why an EV? Well, it has a huge motor. It's got thick top plates, thick bottom plates, and a tremendous amount of electromotive force. What does that translate to? It translates to efficiency and output. You can gain anywhere from 6 to 9 dB difference between an EV10 and another 10. So let's say that it was a 3 dB difference, which it is usually far more than that. You're doubling your output power. So a little 20 watt amp is going to sound like a 40 watt amp just by having an EV10. Unfortunately, they don't make them anymore, and fortunately for us, we do have a small number of them that we'll be using in a limited run of amplifiers. But they are just a fabulous 10. If you look at the entire equation of the amplifier, the output transformer, the speaker, and you create a single unit, the EV10 is a highly inductive speaker with a lower DCR than a standard 8 ohm speaker. I think the DCR is like 5.7 ohms or so. And as such, because of its inductive properties as well, it forms a very peculiar and in a positive way coupling with our particular output transformers. And I first observed this with EVs on Fender Deluxe Reverbs back in the 70s, when I'd be modifying Deluxe Reverbs for Lee Ritenour and Larry Carlton and putting EVs in it, and then watching the fact that the waveform was very, very peculiar, the waveform, because that particular output transformer, coupled with the actual inductive reactance and EMF and everything else of that EV, created its own sound. And that output transformer is a big part of that, out of that equation. If you were to say stick a ceramic magnet, standard 8 ohm CTS or Eminence or Pile, that same thing, you'd have a completely different result. And it's obvious, you can actually see it on an oscilloscope. It is not like voodoo, it's real. So for example, in the Super Champ, as well as in our Pupster 25, there is a coupling effect between that transformer and the speaker, and that it is a magic unit of the equation. And the way that they work together, and the way that the waveform actually it doesn't even look sinusoidal, it looks more triangular when it comes out because of the peculiar reactance issues between that output transformer and the voice coil motor assembly of the EV. This EV that we're using was actually created sometime in the 70s and was discontinued in the mid-90s. It was probably the most powerful of the 10s. There was two versions of the 10s. There was a 10 called the Force 10, which had a smaller magnet assembly, and then there's the EVM 10L. These are the EVM 10Ls. These are the biggest and baddest of the 10-inch EVs. They have the highest efficiency as well as the highest power handling. They're capable of somewhere between 150 and 200 watts apiece. Now what that meant in the good old days was I could put a pair of these in a Vibrolux and send them on the road like I did with Jim Messina and not have to worry about these speakers ever coming back blown. He could tour around the world for a couple of years and maybe have some tube changes, and that's one of the great benefits of having these EVs, is just that they are absolutely so durable. If they need to be reconed at some point in the future, they can. The cone kits and voice coils are available. So the history of the speaker is that Mark IV Industries had purchased Electrovoice at some point, and Mark IV was famous for its oil filters. It owned Purolator oil filters. And how an oil filter company and a speaker company came under the same corporate, umbrella, that was really a kind of a culture clash. I mean, a speaker company and a great microphone company like Electrovoice do not have anything in common with an oil filter for a Chevy Big Block V8. So anyway, fortunately, Mark IV Industries exited out of the picture, and there's better people that are in charge of EV today, but this speaker is not being manufactured any longer. When I had my shop in Valley Arts, when I first started in Hollywood, I had my shop in Valley Arts. Even dating back to my shop in San Diego in 1972, I needed a heavy-duty 10 to throw into these Vibroluxes, Tremoluxes, and when I would modify champs and add more power to champs. So, I mean, some of the famous artists, the most famous artists, if you listen to Lee Ritenour with his Vibroluxes, and Mitch Holder, and Tom Rotella, and a lot of the cats from the 70s, Vince Gill, when he was with Pure Prairie League, I believe I built a modified Vibrolux for him, and we threw EVs in it. And that's dating back to, I think, 1979 or something. So a lot of famous people like that.